Hey everyone, my name is Peter. Welcome to my Game Week 12 Transfer Targets video. In this one, I'll take a look at some of the most popular transfers in and out this week and discuss whether they are moves I think are good to make or not. As always, please do hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoy the video. Now let's get into it. Mo Salah seems to be top of everyone's shopping list, with almost 300,000 transfers in this week. And with Southampton up in Game Week 12, I absolutely get not wanting to go without him. We've all seen that Southampton have one of the weakest defences in the league. 2.09 expected goals against per 90 minutes tells us everything we need to know about them. Salah's at the very top of his game right now, with 7 double-digit hauls in the first 11 weeks, and the only player in the game to have over 100 points already. He's also been allowed to take the full 2 weeks off during this international break due to fears over the quality of the playing surface Egypt's matches will take place on, so he'll be in peak condition for the Southampton game. Bearing in mind injuries to Jota and Chiesa leave Liverpool slightly short on attacking options, added to the fact that Núñez and Diaz will be returning late next week from South America after 2 tiring games for Uruguay and Colombia, it seems inevitable that Salah will get the full 90 minutes too, just adding to his appeal. I wouldn't want to be without him this week. A close second on the list of players I feel are almost essential in Week 12 is Cole Palmer. After dropping out of the England squad, Palmer is currently yellow flagged, but he completed the full 90 minutes against Arsenal in Week 11, so it seems thoroughly unlikely he'll be unavailable this week. He only has just over 100,000 transfers in so far, but that's due to being flagged, and I'd expect that number to be much higher if he wasn't. I'm sure it'll increase significantly nearer the deadline, as Chelsea have an excellent fixture away at Leicester, who may have better defensive statistics than Southampton at 1.87 expected goals against per 90 minutes, but that's still the third worst record in the league this season. Chelsea go out to attack most teams, and they certainly will against Leicester. It could be a high-scoring game, and if it is, we know Palmer will be heavily involved. I don't like to say people are essential, but this week both Palmer and Salah are about as close as you can get to that. Bruno Fernandez is currently the second most popular transfer in this week, with over 200,000 new owners, after his huge 17 points at home to Leicester in Game Week 11. I was raving about him as a short-term 3-week punt last week, due to a wonderful run of 3 fixtures, but that run is now down to 2, with just Ipswich away and Everton at home, before it gets much harder for Manchester United. Arsenal away, Forest at home, and then Manchester City away is really tough. 2 of the best 3 defences in the league, followed by the defending champions. Are United doing well in these fixtures? I'm not sure they're going to win any, and I think they're going to find it tough to score. So, with only 2 nice fixtures ahead, I struggle to see Fernandez as a good transfer option this week. I'm sure he can do well against Ipswich and Everton, but I don't think that's enough to go for him. For the same reasons, I wouldn't really be encouraging people to transfer in Brian and Burmo this week either. 2 nice fixtures in Everton and Leicester up next doesn't hide the fact that Brentford's run of games from game week 14 to 22 is pretty awful. Villa, Chelsea and Brighton away, Newcastle, Forest, Arsenal, City and Liverpool at home, all within 9 weeks. I'm sure he'll do well against Everton and Leicester, but 2 games just isn't enough when you're transferring a player in. You really wouldn't want to keep him after game week 13, so it's just not worth going there now. I want to talk about Luis Diaz this week, as 100,000 managers have already offloaded him, and that seems a little crazy to me with Southampton up next. I could understand making the move in game week 13, before Liverpool play Manchester City, although I think the long-term fixtures are actually pretty good after that. We've already mentioned how well Liverpool can do against Southampton, and I personally think Diaz has a pretty decent chance of starting. Liverpool's front 3 is inevitably going to be Salah on the right, plus 2 of Diaz, Gakpo and Núñez. All 3 of them are away on international duty and will probably play 2 games each. Now Gakpo plays in Europe, so has less travelling, will return to Liverpool sooner, and will be less tired than Diaz or Núñez, so I think it's likely he gets a start against Southampton. Both Diaz and Núñez are playing in South America and have long flights back to England after their games which finish on Wednesday morning. It still feels as if Slot has a preference towards Diaz over Núñez in his first 11 though, and with Diaz finishing his international fixture a couple of hours earlier than Núñez and having a slightly shorter flight home to England, it seems to me that he is slightly more likely to get the nod for Southampton than Núñez. That would be enough for me to want to keep him and hope that he does, because Southampton is just such a great fixture. As an owner, yes, you would be hoping for the best, but I know if I sold him and then he did start, I'd be far more annoyed than if I kept him and he only came off the bench. Erling Haaland continues to be a big sell in the FPL community after only 2 attacking returns in 6 fixtures, and with City's fixture run not being very simple for the next 3 weeks, I think that's totally understandable. Spurs at home might turn out to be a decent game for him, as Spurs have been a bit unpredictable recently. We don't know whether to expect the outstanding team who demolished Villa in game week 10, or the lacklustre one who lost 2-1 at home to Ipswich in game week 11. We do know that week 13 away to Liverpool for City and week 14 at home to Forest are against 2 of the toughest defences in the league though. Sure, Haaland can score against them, but it's pretty reasonable to want to sell him and invest in players with better fixtures, especially when we've seen how good the ones are for Salah and Palmer this week. Using 2 transfers to downgrade Haaland and bring in either of them feels like a very sensible move to me. There's also been a lot of managers removing Trent Alexander-Arnold this week after his early substitution in game week 11 at home to Villa. I know that would have been frustrating for owners after Liverpool kept another clean sheet, but the news on his injury is that it's not expected to keep him out long term. Annoyingly, he might not make the Southampton match on Sunday the 24th though, which would be the one you really want him for. Perhaps he'll start, but with 2 big games in a week coming up after that against Real Madrid on the 27th and Manchester City on the 1st of December, it's reasonably likely he'll be given the Southampton match off anyway, even if he is just about fit to play. The other 2 games are simply much tougher for Liverpool, and they'll really want him for both of them. So the question is, do you still want to keep him if he misses the Southampton game? In essence, it's just 1 match, and if you wanted him long term, missing 1 game shouldn't make too much difference. The alternative view is, he has a blank, followed by City and Newcastle in the next 3 weeks, which is a pretty poor run for a player costing 7.1 million, and maybe the funds can be invested better elsewhere. At the end of the day, you have to look at your own team and decide, if you were to downgrade him to a player perhaps in the 4.5 to £5 million bracket, would you be able to use the extra 2 to 2.5 million to upgrade your team significantly in other areas? If that looks good to you, and you can do it without taking a hit, then perhaps it's worth using a transfer to take him out. Pedro has come right back onto our radar in the last week after impressing off the bench against Manchester City with a goal and an assist to win the game for Brighton. And his timing is great. Brighton are just beginning a really nice run of fixtures, starting away at Bournemouth this week. His manager, Fabian Hürzeler, has come out raving about Pedro in his press conferences, saying, "Every team in the Premier League has this key player that makes a difference, and in our case, that's João Pedro." So we know he rates him highly, and I'd expect him to be back in Brighton's starting lineup swiftly. Therefore, at 5.4 million, a player who has penalties, and with a run of games as good as Brighton's, it feels like Pedro could be amazing value, particularly over the next 7 weeks. If you can get him, I think it's a great move. I don't think it's essential to do it this week though. Bournemouth away is one of the harder matches in Brighton's lovely run, but you do really need him in ahead of Southampton in game week 13 if you're getting him. That's the best game he has, so make sure he's in your team by that point. Finally, I'll talk a little about Alexander Isak. After a really slow start to the season, Isak has come to form recently with 3 goals and an assist in his last 3 matches. And they were against good opposition too, in Chelsea, Arsenal and Forest. Unsurprisingly, he's a popular transfer in this week, with over 150,000 new owners, many of whom I imagine might be managers who are looking to downgrade Haaland. And it's a good move to make in my opinion. We saw last season how good Isak can be, with 21 goals, despite good competition for the number 9 role from Callum Wilson. Wilson may be getting closer to a return from injury, but Isak is clearly the first choice of the 2 now. Eddie Howe rarely plays them together, and although Wilson may take some minutes off him towards the end of games when he's back and fit, I don't think he threatens his starting place at the moment. Newcastle, excluding at game week 14 at home to Liverpool, have a wonderful run of fixtures now. None of the other 13 fixtures up until game week 24 are against any of the current top 6, and West Ham, Palace, Brentford, Leicester and Ipswich, all in the next 6 games, have shown themselves to be very leaky defences. All in all, it's a great time to get him. I just want to mention before the end of this video, I know a lot of players have suddenly become flagged with potential injuries in the last 4 days, with many having pulled out of their international team squads. It may feel like a reason to panic if you've got a few of those in your team, but most of these guys are going to be okay come game week 12. We've seen it before, and we'll see it in the future, where players pull out of international squads and then start the next game for their club team. It's often only an opportunity the clubs take to make sure players get a decent rest, having played a lot of minutes recently. Don't feel you might have to worry about selling them straight away. wait to see what information we get during the international break over the next 9 days, and in most cases, we'll end up with a pretty good idea who's fit and who isn't. Just to repeat, most of these guys will be okay come game week 12, and lots of news will come out in the last 24 hours before the deadline. That's all for now. I hope this video was helpful, and as always, please hit the like button and subscribe if you enjoy it. Thanks for watching, see you for the next one.